Selectmen, Cemetery Commissioners, and Highway Commissioners. Before we begin, I have a disclosure to read. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 20, and the governor's executive orders imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, although a quorum of the members of the Dudley Board of Selectmen will be physically present for this meeting, no in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. The meeting will be live broadcast on Dudley Cable Access Television, Channel 192, and members of the public can also access the rebroadcast of the meeting online via YouTube. In the event of an unanticipated interruption in this broadcast, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Members of the public who wish to appear before the Board of Selectmen must make an appointment to appear on an upcoming agenda by contacting Michelle Jervis at selectmen@dudleyma.gov or by calling Michelle at 508-949-8001. Placement on the agenda is not guaranteed, however, and persons requesting to appear before the Board of Selectmen should not attend a meeting in person unless and until the appointment has been confirmed by the Board of Selectmen. Persons with matters appearing on a meeting agenda may request that they attend via virtual means, such as conference call, rather than an in-person attendance. Such requests should be directed to Michelle Jervis at selectmen@dudleyma.gov or by calling Michelle at 508-949-8001 no more than 3 business days in advance so that appropriate arrangements can be made. However, persons or representatives with matters appearing on the meeting notice/agenda who wish to be physically present at the meeting must observe the following requirements. In accordance with existing requirements imposed by the governor, meeting rooms will be limited in terms of the total number of persons that may be physically present at the same time, including board/committee members and staff. Satellite rooms will be available for overflow, and the meeting will be broadcast in real time in those satellite rooms. Persons who wish to participate in any particular matter on the meeting agenda will be asked to wait in a satellite room until that agenda item is reached, at which point attendees will be rotated between the main meeting room and the satellite rooms as appropriate. Social distancing must be maintained in both the main meeting room and in satellite rooms. Face masks or coverings will be required in accordance with Governor Baker's May 1st, 2020 COVID-19 Order Number 31, quote, order requiring face coverings in public places where social distancing is not possible, unquote. A copy of that order can be found at https://www.mass.gov/doc/May1-2020 masks and face coverings/download. Failure to comply with these requirements may lead to an attendee's removal from the meeting. Now, if you all please join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And please also join me in a moment of silence to recognize the over 113,000 confirmed cases and 8,300 deaths from COVID-19 in Massachusetts. Thank you. First on the agenda is the acceptance of minutes, approved minutes of June 29th, 2020.
Got to do a vote for remote participation.
We have Paul Joseph who wishes to participate remotely. Can I have a motion from the board?
So moved, Mr. Chairman. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Ruda, do we still do roll call votes?
Yes.
For remote, yes.
Yeah, whenever there's remote attendance.
Just wanted to double check. Okay. All in favor, Mr. Sullivan?
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Martin, aye.
Kerry Siganovich, aye. Unanimous. Paul, you have joined the meeting remotely.
You can vote, too.
I most certainly have. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, first up on the agenda is the acceptance of minutes, approved minutes of June 29th, 2020. What is the board's pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
John
Aye.
Marcy, aye.
Oh, that's right.
Yep, roll call. John
Jay Johnson,
Marcy,
aye.
aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Gary Siganovich, aye, unanimous. Next on the agenda is the legislative update. Representative Durant updates briefs relative to fiscal year 21 state budget, local aid and Chapter 70 funding. The representative will provide additional information relative to state and local issues, and will take relevant questions from the Board of Selectmen and department heads. Mr. Durant, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ooh, I can remove this? Is that all right? It's a little easier. Thank you for having me here tonight. I have to be honest with you, I don't have a lot of things to give you information on. As you know, everybody is waiting for the 2021 year budget from the state. We in the legislature are waiting for that as well. One of the things that's happening right now, unfortunately, is, of course, you're all aware that we're, depending on who you ask, between $6 and $8 billion in the hole right now on our budget. Since we only have about $3 billion in the rainy day fund, that leaves us with an enormous gap, even if we were to drain that rainy day fund, which we're probably not going to do. So at this point, we are basically waiting to see what the federal government does, to see if they're going to provide states with relief. That's been the major holdup that we're waiting on, to see how that's going to come forward. And until that does, we expect that the budget will continue to be delayed. Now, as you probably all know, we are, by statute, required to break on July 31st. We technically can't have any anything that needs a roll call of the House or the Senate needs to happen before July 31st. It doesn't mean that can't. Typically, we have informal sessions that occur after that, right up until the start of the new session for minor bills. Those are bills that typically can be, you think of bridge namings, things like that. Those bills can go through in an informal session on a voice vote, but it only takes one person in either chamber to shut down a session. So we can't put forward any substantive bills that require roll call
Point of
votes.
order, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Joseph?
If anybody uses that mic at the table, by the way, hi, Peter. The problem is that only every third or fourth word comes out. The mic keeps cutting out.
Want me to try the other one? I'll try the other one.
Go socially distant. You can do
I will put my mask
Are you
back
hearing
on.
it okay, Fred?
it. Might be the phone speaker.
It might be the phone speaker, Mr. Joseph.
I'll give it a go, just in case.
We'll give it a shot, though.
We'll see what happens. Okay, try this one. So we are scheduled to break on July 31st. That doesn't mean that we can't be called back in for emergency, so we half expect that will occur going forward. But to be honest with you, we have not gotten any indication as to when the budget will be ready. I know that's put an enormous strain on cities and towns all over the Commonwealth, including those of mine in the 6th Worcester District and including this town here of Dudley. It's extremely difficult to make decisions when you don't know what's coming in from the state. I think that it's prudent to expect at least 20% cut. But again, that's just me telling you that, and I have no official notification that that's the case. I know you guys desperately look, as all my towns do, to try to make decisions based on the information you have, and there just isn't any information to be had. So I think it's very difficult for you guys to go ahead and put budgets together, or even try to make projections and try to keep people at least gainfully employed and know what they're doing here in town. So it is difficult, and I wish I had more information from the town budget side. We did get an update today from DESE regarding the school year. Right now they're asking school districts to provide basically plans for 3 different scenarios. Those scenarios would be having education be taught in school, having all the pupils come to the school, except for medical necessary people who can't, those who are having medical problems that would permit them from doing so. The second scenario would be kind of a hybrid where some of the students come in, some of them do online training, and a third would be complete online training to continue that on. Many of the legislators in the call today were concerned that it would be very easy to just basically shut down and start this whole process all over again. So there's a lot of talk about that. And unfortunately, like I say, I'm sitting here and not being able to give you too many answers, except to tell you that we're trying the best we can. We're trying to make sure that everybody's kept safe. And unfortunately, you know, the old saying that something flows downhill. And when we get down to the town level, we just don't know what we're giving for state aid. So I'm happy to take questions. I kind of thought this might hopefully be more of a give and take. So many things are happening all at the same time. And so I can give you answers where I know them, and others I can find out the answers if I don't know them.
Board members, any questions? Marcy?
Representative, excuse me. When you guys are having your formal sessions, are there still like normal stuff being talked about, even though the budget's not even, I mean, what are the big ticket items that people are talking about?
Honestly, no. So all of our formal sessions still are remote sessions. And as we get closer to the end of the month, of course, they become more frequent and more frantic.
Mm-hmm.
We've been told to expect 3 sessions this week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, but they gave us no direction as to what would be on the agenda for those 3 sessions. We do expect, and I spoke to the chief just briefly before we started here, we're expecting the bill from the Senate to come on the police bill that, quite frankly, is well, pretty bad. Whether or not the speaker will allow it to go through, whether or not it's going to have amendments, we don't know. Again, we're not, unfortunately, we haven't been given direction. So right now, what we're seeing when we have sessions are some of these bills that we did pass Chapter 90 money to come through. So that was probably the most normal thing we've done in the past couple of months. Everything else has been relatively, pretty much COVID-related, and some emergency stopgap measures and things of that nature.
What, a follow-up to that, what's leadership's answer to finding information about the budget?
Unfortunately, you know, I've tried to speak to Chairman of Ways and Means a couple of times, and they're just being tight-lipped about it. They want to wait to see what the federal government's going to come out with. And quite frankly, they're hoping that the feds are going to come up with some money. If they don't, then it's going to be pretty bad. And we can expect to see some pretty big cuts. I think it's going to be an interesting budget where we have to define what the priorities of this state are. And that's going to be an interesting process. But we're really counting on the feds giving us some money.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
as you know, in Washington, they've been talking about it, but they haven't even worked too fast on what they might push back down for the next stimulus package.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And quite frankly, there's a big push in Congress to not give money to the states. You know, some theory, I'm not saying it's mine, but some of the theories say, hey, you know, if states were in that big of trouble and they couldn't plan, why do they have to rely on the federal government? So there is a battle going on. It's not a slam dunk for money to start flowing down.
Okay, and one last question, Mr. Chairman. So this isn't a time where everybody's like trying to talk about their pet projects that they.
No, I was a little disappointed. We had we did have a bond bill that came out a bond bill came out, but a supplemental budget came out too, and we did see a few, more than a few pet projects come out. Most of them got axed out of it, and at least I can tell you from the people I've talked to from the caucus that I'm in, our prevailing sentiment has been, you know, keep your pet projects to yourself. We need to save the money for what it's
Yeah,
really
okay.
needed for.
That's where I was going with that. And like
Yeah.
budget, all these other things. Even the bill you mentioned earlier seems to be like just because of what's going on nowadays versus like, getting
Yeah.
to the numbers.
Well, we end up being really, as we always are, in the good times and bad, we're always reactionary.
Sure.
And sometimes bad things happen and we react a little too bad, too much in the wrong direction. And I think when we talk about the Senate bill coming out, I think that's a huge understatement there. So we're gonna see. Again, word is maybe it'll come out Wednesday, but here it is Monday and I haven't seen it, so.
Because that'll have budget implications if they pass it.
Yeah, yeah, so it'll have to go through Ways and Means. My guess too is that we're waiting, we're holding a lot of these sessions because what's happening as well, what we saw in some of the bills are that instead of doing a conference committee, because they want to do the social distancing and they want to avoid that in a conference committee. So what they've been doing is having bills just go back and forth between the House and Senate. So the House will put its amendments on, send it back to the Senate where they'll put amendments and change things, send it back to the House where we'll change a few things, and they'll keep going back and forth like this until both sides basically agree on what the bill says, and then they'll pass it. It's possible that we see that in a budget. It's possible that we see some people have talked about just having this big omnibus type budget bill that comes out and says, don't add anything to it, this is the deal, this is coming out, House and Senate's already agreed to it, the leadership that is, of course, and this is what you're getting. I tend to believe that's very possible for the simple fact that we're 2.5 weeks away from July 31st. But that's been kind of the process where they just throw things back and forth, and that could be the purpose behind being in all of this week.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Sure.
Any other board members? Department heads, any questions for Representative Durant? No.
Just, I had a question, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.
Two of
Ruda.
them. Peter, as far as Nichols College being in town, is there any universal guidance on the return of students to school at the end of August? I mean, is DPH providing guidance that's a one-size-fits-all, or is it the Wild West in terms of?
I haven't seen, and I can look that up. I haven't seen any one-size-fits-all yet. Again, especially from higher ed, I've been paying more attention to DESE. So I haven't seen much in higher ed from that standpoint. I know that a lot of colleges are starting to talk about just doing online classes, at least for the first semester.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't find that to be a surprise, but I think right now it will be more up to colleges. So I can look to see if DPH has put anything out about that, but I don't recall anything about that.
You hadn't heard anything? Okay, thanks. And the other thing I just had, Mr. Chairman, was, is September 31st a reasonable guideline to anticipate some glimmer of hope in terms of a budget for FY21?
So
Local aid number? Or?
So you want to put me on the spot?
No, I don't, no, I know you're not making the call. I realize that you said it yourself, it's dependent on what the federal government, so let me rephrase the question, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly.
Do you anticipate the federal government providing, or have you heard any scuttlebutt about the federal government providing the Commonwealth with a number?
Yeah, I would like to believe that by the end of September, we're going to see that. I mean, the federal budget is in October. And so I'd like to believe that's what's going to happen. And, I mean, let's be honest, it's an election year. So, Congress needs to get their act together as well to make sure they're satisfying their
Right.
constituents.
It's like you said, it rolls downhill.
I mean, I hate to put that kind of spin on it, but the fact is the fact.
Right.
And so I would expect that we'll see some resolution moving forward as we kind of get through to the end of the summer. I wish it was sooner for us, but that's not a bad estimate.
I appreciate it. Mr. Chairman, I've had weekly contact with the representative. Mostly he's reaching out to me, so he's been very responsive, and now that he's here in person, I want to make sure that we recognize that.
Well,
Thank
and I think it's tough. And I'm glad we get to talk a lot about what's going on, but it's tough. You guys are making decisions based on information that you just don't have, that you just don't know, and so at best it's a guessing game. And I apologize on behalf of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for that. But it's, but that's what it is. It's a guessing game. And so I commend you guys for doing a job that probably none of you expected to have to go through this kind of thing. Mr. Rudy, you're relatively new. Mr. Johnson, you're relatively new. This is what you came in, and all of a sudden it's like, geez, this just hits us right off the bat with all this going on. So it's difficult, and I appreciate the job you guys are doing, not knowing what you don't know.
Well, thank you for keeping the lines of communication open. That's important. Nothing gets done without communication. Thank you for reaching out to Mr. Ruda. And it sounds like there's a lot of things going downhill, and you're in the middle of the hill, and we're at the bottom of the hill, and you haven't seen anything yet.
Well,
So
I'm always happy to tell you what I don't know.
You're very good at it too, Peter.
I appreciate that. I worked hard at that.
Thank you very little.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you. Any further questions of Representative Durant? Anyone? Going once, going twice?
What's your remote person?
Mr. Joseph?
Thank you, Peter.
Just want to make sure you could hear me, Paul. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, guys. And
Thanks,
again, if you
Peter.
have questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. I think you all have my cell phone number.
Mhm.
And if you don't, Mr. Ruda has it. I'm happy to give you whatever information I have, and I'll update you as to what we find out after this week's sessions.
Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thank you
Peter.
very much for
Thanks
coming. We
in.
appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Take care, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda is the Town Administrator's Report. Mr. Ruda.
Coming right up, Mr. Chairman. Without going, we have well, you know, when I put these agendas together, they seem a lot smaller until we actually get into it, so I'll keep it as brief as possible. So, without going back and revamping the history of our Amoresco project on the landfill, I think the board is relatively familiar with the history of that. The town, 2017, signed a contract for Amoresco to place a solar array on our capped landfill. It was stalled for a very short period of time, maybe about a year. We revitalized it, only to find we had to move some solar credits around. We had a lot of credits that we were buying from another project. And through a lot of work in the town hall, we were able to realign our solar credits that we're buying. We have a good handle as to what we're buying now. We were able to work effectively with National Grid and the Department of Energy, the State Department of Energy. Were able to have the school system, particularly the Dudley schools, recognized as municipal entities, which they had not previously been recognized as, for the purposes of buying additional solar credits. So that would now qualifies us to be a municipal off-taker of those credits, which will put us in a position to negotiate a better deal for the project. Again, that we are already under contract to move forward with. So the next steps for the Amoresco project will be to negotiate the terms and conditions of the site lease, the terms of an on-bill credit agreement, and the terms and conditions related to the SMART program and related Department of Energy Resource regulations. And I was hoping, maybe just to cleanse everybody's palate from COVID, that maybe a selectman or two could join me as part of those negotiations to kind of streamline it and move it forward a little more quickly, to make recommendations to the other members of the Board of Selectmen.
Huh?
So without objection, I'll reach out to different members of the board and see if they may be interested in doing that.
Certainly.
Okay. We had discussed, after our last town meeting, Mr. Joseph approached me about making a video the way they had in the past to highlight big-ticket items that would be put before the voters for debt exclusion and so forth and so on. And part of the, as a byproduct of our last town meeting, were a few fairly important articles failed. And I think there was a lot of, there's room for improvement in terms of our ability to, and particularly my ability to educate the public in terms of what some of these articles may be for and the importance of these articles. So we've discussed it, and we'd like to put together a video produced by Nichols College in their studio, their green room up there. The town clerk has made that, has reached out to the college, and we're good to go in August. We're gonna have a student helping us make a series of videos for upcoming debt exclusions, and an overall video that for a working title, for lack of a regular title, is called Town Meeting, How Stuff Works. And it just kind of goes over the local form of government, what the citizens' ability to access what their rights are, what they can vote for, how they can participate more fully, and how the different branches work. And I thought that we could make that video and go ahead and just replay it pretty regularly. You know, maybe it's got a 5 or 6 year shelf life. We just keep replaying it over and over again, just so that people every once in a while, when they're going past the channel, they may be able to access it on cable access. They could look at it on our website online, and so forth. So I came up with an outline that I think we have in our packets here, just to kind of get the synapses firing in terms of who in town may be interested in participating in making the video. So there's an outline here. I figured it would be about 96 minutes long total. Kind of gives a brief history of the town meeting form of government, puts our modern structure in context, you know, how the relationship between the Board of Selectmen, town administrator, and department heads, how that works. Talks about the function of town meeting. They serve, you know, pretty much as the legislative branch. They pass all the articles on the town warrant and so forth. The function of the town clerk, the treasurer collector, 2 elected officials, principal assessor, so forth and so on. So what I did was I plugged some names into this outline, and I'm trying to get to see if the board has a better idea in terms of who might be better, you know, to either go over that piece in the outline for the video, modify it, help me write a script for it. There's no way I can't write the script for this entire thing. So my thought was, for example, if Mr. Siganovich, I plugged him in here for 8 minutes to talk about department heads and departments, not only does he take on that role, but then he actually begins developing a script and kind of talks about the things in that outline. So there it is, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of looking for a little bit of reaction from the board.
Board members?
You willing to do it?
I think we should.
Marcia?
Yeah, absolutely would, Jonathan. I like the way you have the outline there with potential people and topics and the minutes, and I think, you know, maybe, like I said, maybe another subcommittee to kind of like work up a script or
Right.
something, and make sure we have all of our facts right, because I'm sure if it's gonna have like a shelf life, we wanna make sure we're up to date. Zoning Board of Appeals and Municipal Hearings Officer, doesn't sound as exciting as it seems, but it could be, right? That way people know.
Well, I take the less exciting topics and I put the more exciting members of the Board of
Oh, is that
Selectmen
why?
on it to make it more exciting for people. See what happened?
Gotcha.
Then Mr. Johnson must be the most exciting of us. He gets
Who
who
can
can
raise
raise
my
my
ta-
taxes.
That's the most perfect one on the list, I have to say.
I thought that worked.
That one worked.
Oh, yeah,
pretty
that
well.
works
See,
great.
that's why I just put these in as
I get to write the script?
suggestions, Mr. Chairman. Suggestions.
I just like
Not
the,
me.
I like the way you did this and all the department heads and all the different, you know, people in the town that people might interact with. You know, like maybe there's the building department, like how and when the permitting process. I mean, there's so many different roads we could go down on that. You know, it's just-
Right.
Just like giving people a way to, you know, new to town, you know, here's some things to know.
That's kind of why I put the time limit on those as well.
No, it's great.
Welcome wagon drops off a DVD or something.
The welcome one.
Okay?
Oh, that looks great. That looks great.
Thanks, Jonathan. Very good.
The next one, Mr. Chairman, is Complete Streets. At the end of last summer, I attended a training in MassDOT. That was the first step in the requirement to make the town eligible to apply for Complete Streets grant funding. And a complete street, as defined under this popular grant program, is one that provides safe and accessible options for all travel modes, walking, biking, transit, and vehicles for people of all ages and abilities. And for Dudley, this means the construction and design funding to add sidewalks to improve the safety and usability at intersections such as the one at Dippins. It means connecting Nichols College and Shepherd Hill with sidewalks and bike lanes, maybe all the way down to the center of town. It includes better traffic flow patterns around Stevens Mill, and it provides us with an overall transportation infrastructure plan into the future. So Bill Scanlon and I, our interim town planner, had a conference call with CMRPC this week, and they will be providing assistance to us at no cost to the town to position ourselves to receive funding for these important projects. The next steps under the program will be to send out a letter of intent to MassDOT for the town to adopt a complete streets policy. And then, having adopted the policy, we will complete the requisite site visits and surveys and public meetings to begin the grant application process. So what I'm asking the board for is to authorize me or either on behalf of the board or authorize the chairman to sign a letter of an intent to MassDOT that we intend to pursue a complete streets policy. Doesn't mean we have to adopt it. It just says it's our intention to pursue and look into a complete streets policy. It will come before the board. We'll deliberate it, to get everybody all the chance to read it. We don't have to adopt it. All we have to do is send a letter of intent saying that it is our plan to pursue it. And frankly, there's no real flashpoints in any of these policies. We're in Worcester County, from Worcester south, we're surrounded by towns that have successfully adopted this program and taken advantage of the grant funding. We just stand out almost like a bullseye of the only town that hasn't ever taken advantage of a complete streets grant funding project. So I think we need to go down this road and at least see what the potential is, particularly seeing that we're looking at an economic development project that would marry very nicely to the to this kind of grant funding, the intersection at Dippins.
I think
We've got a
that's-
CDBG grant that was secured last year in the Jericho area. We're looking at the Stevens Mill project. This one will address the intersection at Dippins. I think it's a pretty good plan for us to continue to look into.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
is the administrator looking for a vote or just positive endorsement from the board? Because either way, I'll make
Either
the-
one will work, Mr. Sullivan, either to have Mr. Siganovich sign as chair as the chief executive official, or authorize me to sign it, the letter of intent. The next step will be for the next agenda, I'll bring a draft policy forward.
One thing that sticks out to me, Mr. Administrator, I see it means connecting Nichols College and Shepherd Hill with sidewalks and bike lanes to the center of town. I cannot stress how many people have asked me, could we get sidewalks going from Shepherd Hill up to Nichols because of how many students run for track, cross-country, what have you. And that intersection there really isn't the best intersection, but where is the money going to come from? I think this is a great idea.
Great.
Any other comments, board members?
Yeah.
Mr. Marcy?
Oh, my God, Mr. Johnson.
Oh, Mr. Johnson?
Town administrator, how far back will these get pushed due to the state budget issues?
How far will they be pushed back? I think I just missed my opportunity to ask Representative Durant, but I think...
No, I ask you the questions, you
Yeah.
ask him the questions. That's
I
all.
think it's pretty much, I know as much as he does, so what does that tell you?
So it's very likely.
Sell yourself short.
It's coming down the hill and he hasn't seen
I
it
haven't
yet.
received a notice that this is, there are several grants that I thought would be curtailed, but we're still going forward as it stands right now, so.
I think we should go for it and let them tell us no.
In
Or at
some
least
cases-
get on a waiting list if that's what it takes. Mr. Marcy?
Yeah, there's a couple things, generally in favor of looking at that stuff. Anything that we can use to make the town more usable and quality of life and interests is a great thing. when I read that, it made me think of, we have a National Historic District right through there, and, how are we gonna put some sidewalks there? There's one thing I thought of. We don't have to solve that now. And the second thing is, I have to ask, every time I hear grants, I wanna know, the other towns that have done this, have there been any other major strings attached to that grant money for those? I always ask that.
The only string attached so far, and I did a day's training on it, is that once you adopt a plan, you can't honky-tonk the rest of your streets, you have to move forward with that. So when you propose to replace, repair, or add a street to town, it's got to follow those certain guidelines, which are pretty common sense guidelines in terms of usability. And if you adopt the plan and you need to follow those guidelines, it's not an unfunded mandate to follow the guidelines.
That's
You're
what I was
eligible to
getting at.
receive money
Okay,
if you follow those guidelines, so
that's what I was getting
it's
at.
pretty reasonable.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
I'm good.
Nothing. Mr. Joseph, anything?
Not at this time.
Thank you. So, Mr. Administrator, would you like a vote from us? Would you like,
If you can vote, Mr. Chairman, or without objection, I will present I think Mr. Scanlon has a draft letter of intent that will I can present to you, or I can sign it. It's entirely up to the board. Probably easier for you to sign it, keep it nice and clean.
let's keep it clean.
Don't understand what we're.
I believe Mr. Ruda wants us
Not to object.
not to object, or he wants...
I want to make sure before we ask the chairman to sign the letter that there was no objection on the board. We can either do that by vote, or we can just not.
We can show us the letter, and if you want to sign it, we can vote on it.
You want me to provide the?
Do you have a copy of it?
I don't. It's a letter of intent to pursue a policy. Doesn't bind us to.
I'd like to
adopt
see
it.
what the letter contains before make a motion to do something with
Do we
it.
have a copy of that letter? All right, well, I'll send that out tomorrow.
Thank you.
We're meeting next week anyway, right? Because we didn't meet last week.
Well, we'll see. Is it, do you have something,
Gotta
do you
get
have
your
something
wish,
planned,
though.
Mr. Chairman?
Every
Nope.
week.
Just saying, we'll get a copy next week, is what Mr. John
Every
said.
week, every week is fine with me. I don't, can meet as much
Oh,
as we
that's
need
two.
to.
You
We
guys
can meet, if we have business to do, we should meet.
are lucky.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Streetlight reimbursement?
Oh, sorry, streetlight reimbursement. Michelle informed me that we received another check for $27,000. As you recall, we did a LED streetlight replacement a few years ago, and it was being paid for from a separate account, but we've now wrangled all that in, and this is another, this $27,000 will be placed towards the cost of replacing those streetlights. So we're within $25,000 of the cost that we paid to install all of our streetlights. We've been reimbursed about $100,000 so far, so
Good.
we're in pretty good shape. Mr. Chairman, if I could turn the rest of my report over to Michelle for us. She's got some news. I've asked her to work on a few grants for me, and she'd like to report out on that. And then Roberta Johnson, our public health nurse, is going to come in and give us a quick report.
Excellent. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Okay. Well, first of all, our office has been very busy during the COVID crisis. Along with the daily follow-up on phone calls and emails, I've been involved with a couple of grants. Two of the grants we applied for were through the Janet Malzner grant, and they were approved and received payment. One was for $5,000 for the beautification of Village Cemetery. This will provide service of a landscape consultant and for the purchase of new trees and shrubs. As you know, they were cut last fall. So now we're going to make it whole again. So,
Sorry, can you repeat that?
last fall, they cut the trees on Village Cemetery, so now we've got the money to hire a landscape consultant and a master gardener, and we can purchase the trees. So
Through the Mauser
we're gonna
grant.
get a plan together, and we met last Thursday with the Historical Commission and the landscape architect, and it was a very good meeting. And they're going to come up with a nice plan on how they're going to beautify that cemetery, because again, that is a historical section of the town. So it'll look nice when it's all
And-
completed.
I mean, Mr. Chair, I don't want to interrupt Michelle too much, but thank her for her work, but that also follows up with our promise to the folks up there, to the Historical Commission and the general public, that we were gonna make good and try to repair and replace.
I'm all for meeting our promises. Was there a time that we put on that? We're just talking about a gigantic budget crunch.
So this is, through the chair, this is a Mauser grant. It doesn't come out of the budget at all. It's a $5,000 Janet
Never
Mauser
mind,
fund
go,
grant.
let's do it.
Yeah. That's why we went after it, Mr. Chair.
That's why we couldn't.
Gotcha.
We also received $1,500 for a veterans section of Corbin Cemetery for mapping. As you know, we started a veterans section up there in the cemetery, but of course, no one knows where anybody is, so I've hired a mapping company to complete the mapping, and it'll be done in a couple of weeks.
And again, Michelle, that's a grant. That
That
does
is,
not
it's a
come out
grant,
of the
another
budget.
Janet Mausner grant, yes.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
And Michelle got those grants that, while we were going through all this, she was pursuing those grants, so I
Wow.
appreciate her work as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. Okay, next up would be Roberta Johnson, Public Health Nurse, report. Good evening, Roberta.
Everyone.
Hi.
So, Roberta Johnson, so I'm the public health nurse with the town, and I am involved with the Maven surveillance system, which tracks any reportable infections or diseases. And I primarily work with the COVID patients. I've been calling them when they come up in my emails, and I also do the contact tracing. So right now, we had 102 cases, and we're down to 0. So we don't have any active cases in town, which is very good. So I do a daily report to see how many cases come up, and then, like I said, I give them a call, and I stay in touch with them, depending on whether or not they have 10 days or more of their isolation, and just to kind of keep an eye on how they're doing, monitor their symptoms, follow up with them in a few days based on how they feel. And then we would determine the time frame for when they're going to come off. I also do some webinars, weekly webinars with Maven to kind of keep up on the changes that the Department of Public Health puts out in the state epidemiologist to see if there's any further guidance. You know, there's been a lot of, I don't want to say changes, but there's just been uncertain results with serology versus the swab test. So they've been, you know, sending out a lot of guidance with that, because a lot of serology tests will come back either false positive, false negative. So they've helped us with that, to talk to people about those. That's really it with the Maven part, unless you guys, you know, have any questions for me. Oh, I get in touch with the dispatch too, to let them know about any positive household addresses, just so in case fire, police need to go in, everyone's dressed with the protective equipment. And I let the cases know that, so they're aware. Their name is never released. I keep really good tabs on HIPAA, so. You
Just
guys
to make,
have any questions for me?
just to make sure I heard you right, we have 0 active cases in Dudley right now.
We do.
That's amazing. That's good.
Yeah, well, Mr. Chairman, those are the cases that have made it into the system, you're right. So that's part of Roberta's job, is that on a daily basis, when those cases are reported and they enter into the Maven system, now she picks up on that case, contact tracing, contacts the person, and notifies dispatch and takes the precautions. So we don't want to get too excited, because that could change
Oh,
within
definitely.
the next 12 minutes or so, we don't know. But we went from 100 and what was it, Roberta, 160?
102.
102 to 100 to 0, because somebody is on it on a daily basis. I'm sure that if we didn't have Roberta and we were just going by the Commonwealth's numbers, that we would think that we were in worse shape than we actually are. So we're doing something right locally and on the state level, I think.
Excellent. Board members, any questions?
No question, Mr. Chair, just a comment, and it goes beyond Roberta, and a lot of good feedback when Mr. Ruda had that group signing for permits and like, had everybody in here, had the Board of Health, right? You had police, fire, Tom Purcell, help streamline the process, help people get up running, just a lot of good feedback. I think Dudley handled it well to get people up and running, so just want to emphasize that. I know Roberta's part of that. She was out doing inspections and handing out licenses and stuff, so
Yeah,
it's all involved. It was a good process.
It's definitely, Mr. Chairman, a lot of work.
Oh,
Right?
no,
Oh, no doubt.
no doubt. Anything else? Mr. Joseph, are you good?
No, sir.
No, yeah, just thank you, Roberta.
Thank you.
Jonathan and everybody
you.
for, I think we're ahead of the curve, no pun intended, than the other towns around by being on
Knock
top
on
of
wood.
it, you know.
Thank you.
Because-
Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. Next up, we have appointments, resignations. Police Department, vote to appoint Officer Louis Pacheco as a full-time officer for the town of Dudley, effective date July 31st. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen. As you know, Officer Pacheco is in the Boylston Academy, He's scheduled to graduate on July 31st, knock on wood. Certainly has been quite the challenge for him, just because half the time, too, went to remote learning and everything else like that, so it's really been a very, very interesting experience for him. In fact, we were supposed to be here last week, but then when the meeting was postponed, he had to attend evening training this week, so he's unable to be here right now. So what I told him to do is I would bring this up for the board's consideration and have it effective on the date of his graduation, which is July 31st. And I told him I would bring him into a meeting after he's back cleared from here and ready to go. But yeah, he's doing well, and we look forward to getting him on board.
Board members, any questions, comments?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we vote to appoint Officer Louis Pacheco as a full-time officer for the town of Dudley with effective date of July 31st, 2020.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
And we have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Mr.
John Marcy, aye.
Paul?
I'm sorry.
We're doing a roll call vote.
Aye. Paul Joseph, aye.
Thank you.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Carrie Sigenovich, aye, unanimous.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. Like I said, I haven't been...
Thank you, Chief.
Probably in August. Thank you.
Chief.
Next up on the appointments, resignations is Cultural Council. Vote to appoint Cheryl Bernardo, term to expire June 30th, 2023.
So moved. Oh, sorry. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
John Marcy, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
Carrie Sigenovich, aye, unanimous.
Thank you, Cheryl, Mr. Chairman, for stepping up for that.
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. Next up, we have Personnel Board. Vote to accept Joan Gardocki resignation effective May 7th, 2020.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Paul.
I would like to move that we not accept her resignation at this time, and I will explain why. I've had a couple of conversations with the town administrator, the most recent being this afternoon. And I think the problem, as I read Joan's letter of resignation, it was clear that the Personnel Board believed, and by the way, we've lost the two most experienced people we've ever had in the Personnel Board, outside of Shirley Killian, with Peter Fox and now Joan Gardocki. And I think as you look at Joan's resignation letter, the Personnel Board has the impression that when we designated the town administrator as the director of personnel, that and no longer would have a need to function. I know that that was not the intent of the Board of Selectmen, and after talking it over with Jonathan, that was not or is not his intent to give the impression that only a few people are running the town. So what I would like to do is I would like to not accept the resignation tonight, and I would like to make a motion, and Carrie, I know you've got something later on, and I can do it then, but the intent is that we express the wishes of the Board of Selectmen that the Personnel Board will perform all of the duties it did prior to the town administrator being named as the Director of Personnel, and that any recommendations that the Personnel Board would make normally to the Board of Selectmen, they will instead make those recommendations to the board through the Director of Personnel.
Is that a motion, Paul?
I'm sorry?
Mr. Joseph, Mr. Sullivan asked if that was a motion.
I mean, if you want that as a motion, I would be glad to be a motion.
I'm going to second it for discussion with a few questions, if the chair so allows.
Certainly, Mr. Sullivan, go ahead.
My first question would be, we accepted at least one resignation already from an existing member, right? We accepted Mr. Fox's, and I believe we voted, we accepted Rose Smolker's also, right? Previously? So how would it affect the other two who resigned if we only hold up one?
May I answer that, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly.
If in fact one or both of them resigned from the Personnel Board for the same or similar reason, I think that we ought to pass this motion and invite them back, which would allow them to participate as they always did. And if they do not want us to reappoint them, then so be it, but we go out and find somebody else. The key is not specifically who's on it, but that the Personnel Board is in fact, or will function just as it did. That's the key intent of my motion. Because if we don't have a Citizens Personnel Board, then it gives the appearance that we don't need them, we don't want them, and that we want things to be more in the hands of the town administrator. And I know that the town administrator does not want that to be the impression. So if in fact we pass this, and I pray that we do, we can ask those people if they would like to be reappointed.
Okay, so my second question then would be, and I don't have it in front of me because I didn't realize it was coming up, how would the motion as described and just seconded affect the town administrator bylaw that was passed by town meeting? I don't think a motion of the board can supersede the action at town meeting.
Well, we're not superseding it. We are not unmaking him from being the Director of Personnel. What we're doing is we are just requiring the Personnel Board to do everything that they did and to make the reports, the recommendations through the duly constituted Director of Personnel. So we don't have to, we're not going against anything voted by the town.
So then I guess one more question, Mr. Chairman, to you.
Certainly.
To you and the town administrator. And no reflection on the discussion, is that accurate? I don't have the town administrator bylaw in front of me. Is that accurate, that we can restore, or we can ask to restore previous executed functions that I think the bylaw addressed? I mean,
Well, I always thought that the pure will of the people through a town meeting vote would supersede what we could do.
excuse me.
Is that correct, that a town bylaw voted at a town meeting is?
How are we contradicting the town meeting vote?
I'm not sure about that, but one thing that we're contradicting, I've got 3 written, either a resignation or not to be appointed, notes here from these 3 individuals in front of me, and none of them reached out to either, I don't know if they reached out to the former chair.
One did.
They did?
One did.
This is the first I've heard that they do not want to not be in the position. And frankly, I've spoken with 2 of these people over the past week, and neither of them said this to me. They had different concerns.
Did you read, I know Peter Fox has a problem with getting along with Jonathan, but did you read Joan Gardocki's letter of resignation?
I certainly did, and what I was told was her biggest problem was that she didn't get recognized for her service, not that she wasn't going to be in the position. I'm just confused. I'm kind of taken aback here that I kind of feel like the board was left out of the loop in this. That's just my personal
How so?
opinion. Well, this wasn't on, how so? This wasn't on the agenda. Obviously, they've spoken to you. They haven't spoken to anyone else. They're not here. They didn't ask to be here. They're not asking to rescind their resignations or requests not to be appointed. It's an odd request to try to undo a resignation or undo a request
Well,
for
hold on,
appointment.
hold on.
Please let me finish, Mr.
I'm not-
Joseph, and I'll let you finish.
No, I'm not suggesting they'd be reappointed.
Or you can
Mr.
just
Chairman.
talk. Or you can just talk and not let me finish. Go ahead.
All I'm saying is, I'm not suggesting, nowhere does it say in my motion that those people or anyone specifically be reappointed. Where did you hear that?
You said that to ask them to come back.
No, I didn't say that. I said that it's the wishes of the board that the personnel board continue to perform its duties and to make recommendations through the newly designated Director of Personnel, who is also the town administrator. That's what I said.
Okay.
That's not what I seconded, Mr. Chairman.
That's not,
That's not what I seconded. I thought it was, I thought it was not recognize the resignation, and as you stated, reach back to the 2 people. I mean, we can have Michelle read it back, but
I asked that we not accept it yet now, but that is secondary to my motion.
Could you repeat that motion, because when you were discussing it,
Mr. Joseph, Michelle is asking if you could repeat the motion,
please?
please.
All right. Since it's on the agenda in 2 places, Joan's resignation, and later on the agenda, your concern about the personnel board and one other board. I forget the other one.
What they're still doing.
So all I'm saying is, nothing about Joan's resignation, that's separate. I'd like us not to accept it, and hope that if we do it this way, if we pass this motion, that she'll reconsider. But I'm not making the motion so she will reconsider. I'm hoping she does. What I'm saying is that it's the Board of Selectmen's wishes that that the Citizen Personnel Board continue to function as it did prior to the naming of the town administrator as the Director of Personnel, and that all recommendations from the Personnel Board that would normally go directly to the Board of Selectmen instead go to the board, but through the Director of Personnel, who was the town administrator.
Mr. Marcy?
All right, so a couple things, Paul. Man, if your motion was more like not to accept it, period, I'd be more apt to kind of go along with it. But like I said, that bylaw was not just done 5 minutes ago. That bylaw was done when Greg Valuconis was here, fairly early in his tenure. And the part about going back and doing what they did before, that's the part that kind of goes against the bylaw in my book. If you're talking about having them screen candidates for the upcoming highway superintendent, I'm all on board for that. So if this is a matter of people rescinding resignations and being part of that, let's do it. I don't think, I mean, if people are upset.
I still would like that motion on the floor.
Mr. Sullivan, is your second still?
My second would be still in effect with my first question. We've already accepted at least one of the two. I know for a fact we accepted Mr. Fox's. I don't recall.
Regrets, I remember, yeah.
Right, I don't
I
recall if
talked
we
to
did
Mr. Fox.
Mrs. Smolka's when I was maybe not here.
Mrs. Smolka was up for
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
reappointment, and she did
Hold
not
on,
go
Paul,
for it.
give me 1 second there.
Michelle was clarifying it.
Yeah.
Michelle was clarifying a point.
I'm sorry.
Could you repeat that, Michelle?
Mrs. Smolka's, her term was up in June 30th.
Reappointment.
Uh-huh.
So she never wanted to be reappointed.
All right, and Peter was a non-reappointment also, right?
Correct.
So we basically accepted not reaching out. I just,
They didn't ask to, I don't want to be reappointed.
right. And again, my concern would be, and believe me, I think the Personnel Board has served a vital function in town if it's in conflict with the bylaw. And just as an aside, when I was chair, Jonathan and I were contacting every day, and when things move fast, I think what happened was people feel communication wasn't there to affect some of these positions. But at no time did Mr. Reuter, as personnel director, act arbitrarily on his own. I was, as chairman, I was in the loop on everything he did. So
I'm sorry, say again?
I said when Mr. Reuter implemented his plan with furloughs, we were in contact every day. I was chairman at the time, and I think my understanding, he acted within the scope of authority as a personnel director through the bylaw. And I think what happened was people were taken aback that they weren't in the loop. So I don't want to make it look like Mr. Reuter acted all by himself arbitrarily. There was dialogue with myself as chair at the time. So I'm all for if we can do some kind of blend with the Personnel Board. I just want to make sure we're not affecting a bylaw that was passed, that's all.
Yeah, that's, Mr. Chairman, that was my concern as
Mr.
well.
Chairman, can we ask the town administrator for an opinion as to whether or not there is a personnel board, if that would violate the bylaw?
Mr. Ruda?
If Mr. Joseph, through the chair, if there was a personnel board, would it violate the bylaw? No, it wouldn't violate, because the bylaw provides for a personnel board.
We just have
There's
two
been
members.
no,
Mr. Chairman, can you repeat? Because his mind doesn't come through clearly.
He said, and correct me if I'm wrong, he said that the bylaw does allow for a personnel board.
and I never would move
Okay.
to get this.
So then my motion would be in order.
Well,
Okay? Mr. Marcy?
so, but we still have two people that are still on said personnel board. We just need people to have said board filled. So if these people who have reached out to all of us want to do it, they've already resigned or said they don't want to be reappointed, but if they really do, then just say it. Come forward and we'll reappoint them. They will go through the highway superintendent resumes as we expected they would do in the first place, and let's move on. Right? This isn't hard.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Joseph.
right now, we only have 2 people on the personnel board.
That's correct. Later on during the meeting, I will be announcing a list of vacancies and pleading with the townspeople to volunteer. But right now, yes, we have 2.
Is there a minimum number, Mr. Chairman, that we need on the personnel board?
I believe we need 3 for a quorum. I believe. Is that correct?
You can't have a valid meeting without a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I believe 3 is the magic number for a quorum, so we need 1 more person on that board.
And how many spaces are there total on the personnel board?
I believe it's 5 and an alternate.
Yeah, okay, then my motion still stands, because it's not in violation of the bylaw. And then we gotta get our asses in gear and get some additional people to help, so that Jonathan doesn't have to make a decision by himself, and the 2 people who are still on get support of at least some additional people.
I just don't see that.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
through you, would it be prudent then to split the motion, one to indicate we don't want to accept the resignation at this time, and then 2,
You know, I hate to lose Joan because she's got so much experience.
I agree. That's what I'm
Peter,
saying.
I think, Peter is out of the picture, all right? But Joan's letter indicates to me that she took some offense to them being bypassed. Now, does that mean that she would not serve? You know, she's done a lot of things for this town beyond being on the personnel board, and I would like to hold off on her accepting her resignation to see if she'll be willing to come back in and to lead the personnel board, and that we'll do our damnedest to find 2 more people.
Well, just so you know, Paul, if the motion were to be split, 1, not to accept the resignation, I am 100% in favor, and then we can move on to the next
All right,
one.
how do you want it done? You want me to not make a motion, which I haven't yet, about not accepting? I asked if we could hold off on it, but I haven't made a motion to not accept it.
Mr. Marcy.
Mr. Joseph, come through the chair to Mr.
Yep.
Joseph. Has Joan indicated to you that she still wants to be on the personnel board?
I don't know.
I mean, I'm happy to have her if she wants to, if we're gonna, not accept her resignation and she wants to, be reappointed, then I think that's where we should focus our energy. That way we have a quorum. I mean, it's a pressing need to get the highway superintendent, job posted and people interviewing.
Yeah, I know that. I know we do.
Okay.
It would just take a telephone call from John to ask Jonathan to ask her if she would be willing to stay on, because she's got the greatest seniority.
Okay.
And then we just got to get her 2 more people to help. I'm not asking that we reject it now. I'm just saying, can we hold off on accepting it? That's all.
No,
I didn't make a motion to reject it.
This is, I don't know if this matters or not, but the last line of her letter is, "I am therefore resigning my position as a member of the Personnel Board effective June 30th." We're in July.
Was that her term, Mr. Chairman?
That's one thing is her term expired.
She did not expire.
She did not expire.
Put on Monday's agenda, see if she-
Could we still accept this, and if she wants to come on, she could just come back? I mean, I'm not hearing anything from her saying that she wants to be here. I don't want to go beg someone to be something that they don't want to be. And,
All right, let's make this easier, Kerry.
okay, I like easy.
I'm gonna move to table I'm going to table her resignation. I'm going to move to table her resignation letter, her resignation at this time. Now, a tabling requires no second, and it's not discussable. So if we just want to clear it up easily, Jonathan can talk to her tomorrow, and if she says yes, she will stay in, then we only got 2 people, and we've got another person, her, with really a great deal of experience on that board.
Is that part of your motion, Mr. Joseph, to direct Mr. Ruda to call her tomorrow?
No, I can't do that with tabling motion.
Okay.
So I'm going to withdraw my first motion, and I'm simply going to move to table it.
This is legislative gymnastics here.
But a tabling can be defeated by a supermajority of the board, so if the other 4 members don't want it to be tabled, it can be defeated. But the other 4 members have to agree under Robert's rules.
Okay.
Listen, I said it before, and I'll publicly say it again, I would love to see not only Joan, but the other 2 also get consideration. Is that we're gonna go, how far down are we gonna go?
I just, personal feeling, I don't want to beg someone to do something they don't want to do. If they've had enough, they've had enough. I don't want to make someone feel like they have to do something. And also, I don't want to bend the bylaw that we have to appease someone to make them want to come back. I'm just trying to be mindful of the future here. Would it be great to have a personnel board? Absolutely. But we need to have a personnel board that's in line with our bylaws.
Jim, and I take offense to the term that we're bending the bylaw. We're not bending squat.
No offense is meant,
There is a
Mr.
motion to
Joseph.
table on the floor.
Okay. Any further
Not actually
discussion?
take any action, just table it.
Mr. Chair, I think the question would be any objection from the board to the table.
Any objections from the board to the table?
It would take all of us to.
No objections?
No objection.
Nope.
No.
Nope.
None for me.
And that, just to follow on that, so like I said, if Joan really wants to still be part of it, she does have a ton of experience, then we can, again, we can focus on using her talents on helping us find a new highway superintendent versus spending.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we've done the right thing, at least for now,
Wipe the slate.
and I appreciate your latitude, and I apologize for interrupting when I did.
No worries, Paul. We're making sausage here. It's not a pretty thing. What are you gonna do? All right, next up, we have the Economic Development Committee. Vote to reappoint Pam Boggio, term to expire 6/30/2022.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote.
Tom Marcy, aye.
You do the mover and the second. You guys forget from last week? Okay. Steve Sullivan, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Carrie Sigenovich,
Looks so well.
unanimous. It's different not being in front of the Zoom thing. We're forgetting what we're doing.
Yeah.
Next up, town meeting action, ambulance borrowing, November 2020 debt exclusion ballot question. Following the June 22nd, 2020 town meeting approval to purchase a replacement ambulance, Board of Selectmen will vote to place ambulance debt exclusion question on the November 3rd, 2020 ballot or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Ruda.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that we put that onto the November 3rd, 2020 ballot.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
One,
Mr. Sul...
Mr. Johnson, go first. He
We'll let Mr. Johnson go first.
seconded it.
This would be a good time in lieu of not having the video ready to explain the difference between a debt exclusion
Yes,
and
yes.
raising taxes. So it's not confusing.
So, in a nutshell,
Chairman?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
you want me
Mr.
to answer
Ruda.
it?
1 second, Mr. Joseph. Yes?
Yep.
So, So I think the confusion that we're talking about clarifying with the video is that when we go to the town meeting, as our legislative branch, we submit articles of spending and we submit budgets. The town meeting says, yes, we approve your budget, or no, we don't, and we want to make these changes, or we just reject it on its face. The same for spending on items that we need to purchase, repairs that we have to make. If the roof is getting ready to fall in, we ask the town meeting permission to fix it. They say, okay. The FAA, which is a function of the town meeting or a committee of the town meeting, decides and makes a recommendation to the town meeting voters. Don't forget, when voters assemble in town meeting, they are their own entity. So they make the decisions at the town meeting. So they make it, the FAA makes a recommendation as to the best way, based on input from the Capital Improvement Committee and other department heads, the best way, or how they would recommend to the town meeting voters, how to pay for the roof, the ambulance, how to pay for the guardrails, how to pay for other capital spending items. The recommendation for the ambulance was to borrow the money. We borrow the money the town meeting approved borrowing the money to replace the ambulance. Now, when we borrow the money, the other part of borrowing the money is we need to now pay it back. So do we do that? Now we go back to the people. Do we do that by taking 250, 280 grand, 260 grand? What is it, 260, Chief? We take 260 out of the general fund, or
Sorry, Chief, I didn't know if you wanted to talk or not, or if you just wanted to.
It was done, but.
we take 260 out of the general fund, or do we borrow it? And having borrowed the money, that amount of the loan payment goes onto the tax base until the ambulance is paid off, which is generally a few years. And then it comes off the tax base. So you borrow for a big ticket item, goes onto the tax assessment, it's paid off, and then it comes off the tax assessment. That's how it works.
And it's not a permanent tax increase. It's not permanent.
It's for the life of the loan, that's it.
Life of the loan, and that's it.
Two things, Mr. Chair, too. Generally, we get a breakdown from the treasurer, what the impact would be. And we usually don't touch on it too much, but we also have maturing debt every year, so people, as part of Mr. Ruder's idea to do the presentation, if we add debt, we have debt usually every year, something's coming off. So you may get 260, I'll use the 2-year window you just described, but in that 2 years, something else is always coming off.
Right, so you look at it, kind of like your own home finances is one way to approach it. The simplest way to say is, you know, in your house, maybe there's a 2-car family. One with the better car with a car loan, the other one is owned outright. So when the car loan is retired, now you buy the new car to replace it. You retire that, you take on new loans. You generally don't try to have 2 car loans. I don't anyways at once. It's basic. It's no different than the economics in your own household when you boil it right down.
And I know the chief's gonna speak probably much more eloquent than me. We're purchasing a vehicle that's a frontline piece of public safety that provides a service. And speaking as someone who's used it more than he probably would like to admit,
Right.
we're trying to, the chief has done a great job with his comprehensive plan since he's been here. We're trying to stay on top of the level of service that the town provides. And there's only 1 or 2 ways of doing it. And Mr. Ruder spoke eloquently on both
So,
ways.
Mr. Chairman, what I'm asking right now for the board to vote on is to say, we will place this on the ballot for the voters in November to make a decision on. It doesn't mean that you're not conservative or fiscally responsible. You're simply giving the voters the ability to vote on it, yes or no. Do you want to have the new ambulance, or do you not want to have just one ambulance? That's their decision. It's very simple. You can't make the decision. This board cannot purchase that ambulance. The town, unless they have a source of funding that comes from the general fund, the town meeting can't purchase the ambulance. The voters have to say yes to it. So it's a very simple yes or no question. Do you want to assess additional money onto your taxes to pay for a new ambulance? Yes or no? If the answer is no, we don't have another ambulance. It's that simple.
Mr. Marcy?
So, and thank you, Jonathan, that was very, very well said. Mr. Sullivan, again, spot on as always, public safety. Having said that, we just had a town election. I think voters were pretty adamant that we not raise their taxes anymore on those debt exclusions that we needed. I said before on one of the Zooms that we did a pretty bad job communicating about why, even though a lot of work went into figuring out that we needed it. We talked about trash for about 16 weeks, it seemed, and rather than saying this is going to be the fiscal impact to the town and to each individual taxpayer. We need to get back to doing stuff like that. I'm very, very adamant about that. The other part is, so again, I heard people, no more taxes. Some resident calls us the override board, which I find, interesting, because we could say no to everything, but, giving to, as Mr. Ruta's said, giving people the opportunity to say yes or no. Having said that, this ambulance, having 2 ambulances, it's a revenue generator, right? And that's one thing that I hope doesn't get lost in this. We have a fully functional ambulance that can handle the volume of calls, and we all get the alerts that come out. There's a lot of them. Dean's team doesn't have to give those away to other towns. That actually generates revenue. So I think as part of people deciding whether to say yes or no to this, when you go to vote in November, again, this was already passed at town meeting, as Mr. Ruta said. This is the second part. We really need to understand, one of the things as part of the communication is how much, and Dean, you're gonna talk to this, I know, but, this is, here's what we buy, here's the financial benefit we're gonna get from it. So this isn't just a cost, it is a cost, but there's also a revenue side of this as well.
If I could go to Mr. Carmignani quick with the financial portion of it before the chief wraps it up. Mr. Carmignani, you wanted to add something about the cost, the debt, what have you?
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you including me in the conversation. What's been said, I think Mr. Ruta had a good explanation of it, but I'm going to take you a little bit, one step deeper. If you look at what was held out as far as debt in 2019, my number is $1,987,098. And when we move up to 20, it goes down to $1,552,890. And the number for 21, if nothing changes, is $1,210,426, which means over the last 2 years, we have retired 776,672 off of that debt excluded number. So in essence, we could have paid for that ambulance almost 3 times with what's coming on. And some of it is a single item, some of it is the amortization of debt. All of our debt is a level principal and declining interest. So one of the things that was discussed with the Abrahams group was that if we had a debt excluded number, and I'll go back to the 2019 number of $1,987,000, when something came off in 2020, we should have replaced it. So at the very least, there was a stable component for that component of the tax rate, for lack of a more eloquent explanation. So in 2 years, so much has come off, we're taking 2 big steps back. And I think that's one of the things that you need to impress upon people. If we keep this number at the same $1,098,000, somewhere in there, the only thing that's going to affect the average taxpayer is going to be 2.5 plus new growth, and that's basically the formula. I'm sorry I don't have a per, what it's going to change the rate, but we're taking a step back. The best data I can provide for you.
Thank you, Mr. Carmignani.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Joseph.
if you recall at the last meeting or the meeting before, I reminded this board that in the past, when we had a ballot question, we would have at least two appropriate people be videotaped, and that would play over and over on a loop on the channel. And I don't know if we were able to do it through the town website at that time, but it would seem perfect for Jonathan, Chief Kokanowski, and Rich, who just explained things very well and very comfortably, if the three of them did a videotape and that played to explain what the process is and why it did exclusion and so on, then I just think we stand a real good chance having that play over and over on the loop and on our website access. I think that will get a lot of support for it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Joseph. Mr. Marcy?
Yeah, no, I agree with Mr. Joseph. I mean, again, communication is key. Mr. Treasurer Collector, that was fantastic. But, you know, that's the type of stuff we'd like to see in print or on a video or on Facebook so people can consume it. But the good news is we have several months to put that together to get people out there. And Dean, you're really good about doing that out in your methods as well.
Can I speak now?
Certainly can, Chief.
Through you,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman. Good evening, gentlemen.
Saving the best for last. Go ahead.
And the town administrator can correct me if I'm wrong, but I got some points to make. We've always, in the past, when we've had big capital projects, we've done a big social media blitz. I've come in here and made multiple PowerPoint presentations. We did it with the ladder truck. We did it with the building, and the building passed almost 3-1. So we did put the information out there. Number two, I want to remind everybody that the ambulance is about 70% of the fire department's business. Its number one priority is to protect the people and make sure the sick get to the appropriate facility when they need to get there and get healed up quickly. That being said, the last year, and these are rough numbers because I don't have them in front of me, I'm going off memory, but last year we brought in $520,000 in ambulance receipts. This year, so far, we've got $618,000 in ambulance receipts, and we have an additional $32,000 coming from the Mass Health Program. That's not what it's named. I can't remember the exact name, but we do that. And then we have another $33,000 that I just spoke to Rich about from Health and Human Services. That was another payment. So that's $683,000 in ambulance receipts compared to $520,000 last year. My overall budget is $1.1 million roughly. I gave about $72,000 back of that because of the COVID, so we're just over $1 million. But if you subtract the $683, now I know the $683 goes into the general fund and you kind of play the shell game with it, but at the end of the day, I get that back. So roughly 60% of my budget is being covered by ambulance receipts. So that leaves $583,000 to taxpayer money. Now, so that's 40% of my budget that's paid by the taxpayer, and the rest is paid for ambulance receipts. Now, I know if you talk to the accountant, she's going to say, well, that's not true. Well, it is, because I get the money back, even though it goes into the general fund. But that being said, if I go down to one ambulance for any reason, and we have to give up second calls, and I did all this on spreadsheets a while back, you're roughly probably going to lose about $250,000 or $300,000 in ambulance receipts potentially, because I mean the frontline ambulance could break down, or I have to give those second calls away, as Mr. Marcy stated, to other towns. So there are more benefits to having it than just helping the people, even though that's the number one priority. So, and for the small cost, and I understand we're in difficult financial times because of COVID. And, you know, I know what the political climate is out there, and I understand people's concerns. But again, it's a revenue generator, so it's probably the backbone of the fire department. And most ambulances are supposed to be replaced on a 5-year rotating schedule. And this ambulance will be roughly 11 years old by the time we replace it. And my maintenance person's sitting right behind me. He knows how hard these vehicles are to be for the upkeep for them when they get old. I mean, we're looking at other things that are 25, 30 years old. I mean, we're keeping them going the best we can, but again, there was a lot of things when I first became chief 9 years ago that were neglected for many years, and then unfortunately the pile just builds. I mean, we've made great strides, and I'm happy and I'm very thankful that the town's been supportive so far, but you gotta keep building up your infrastructure, not just with my department, but with water, sewer, police, everybody, or it's just gonna end up costing you more down the road.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
and I agree with everything everybody said, and I appreciate the treasurer. Carries much more impact when he's here in front of us with numbers. And again, I understand Mr. Marcy's point. I support the fire department 100%. The chief, he knows that. It's a small price to pay, and I'm not looking for sympathy, and I don't want anybody to come rub my back. But when I had my heart attack in November, you can be damn sure I'm glad we had a paramedic-level ambulance that was able, willing, and was at my house. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that can echo that, so.
24/7, Mr. Sullivan.
We can't lose sight of the fact that it is a revenue generator. It supports over 70%, almost 70% of the chief's budget. But like I said, I'm not looking for sympathy, but damn it, I'm glad it was there when I needed it. And I'll support it 100% when it comes forward.
Any other?
Same here. Mr. Stevens said it very well. 24/7, it's another one of those things that are, asking people to, consider it, with all the data that we'll have presented to everybody, you can make an informed decision. I think we're gonna be better about it going forward, like we said. And, this board's always stood for public safety. We don't wanna go backwards. We wanna be able to go forwards, and something that generates revenue is worthy of your consideration.
Anything? Mr. Johnson?
There's a lot of, expenses in town that are obviously, supporting town recreational purposes, or let's call it, recreation. And then there's life and death scenarios that actually pay for themselves plus. To me, it's a no-brainer. It's not where you cut.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
I just had one thing, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Chief.
And Mr. Administrator, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm down here talking to him every day, chewing his ear about looking for alternate funding sources for this, because I know we have some time before November rolls around, but I believe this is a time-sensitive issue, so we still got to get it so it can be on the ballot, just in case. But I want everybody to know that we're still looking for alternate funding sources, and I'm always looking for grants to pay for this stuff. I mean, when I come back up for department communications, I have a grant to announce that we're awarded Friday, so I
Excellent.
just wanted to put that out there.
Excellent.
So there's potential that we may not need the debt exclusion. I'm kind of hoping. I don't think it'll go that way, but we're looking.
Well, we still need the ambulance, though, Chief.
So, Mr. Chair, you're looking for a motion to support the debt exclusion question? Because if you are, I will make that motion on the November 3rd, 2020 ballot.
Well, that certainly couldn't hurt, Mr. Sullivan.
So moved.
So, wait,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
What happened?
The only
Chairman, do we still have that motion on the floor?
Here's what I'd like to clarify,
Uh,
Mr. Chairman, just
Not
because
quite yet, Mr. Joseph.
you don't, if you'd like to vote to support the question, absolutely, but all I need is a motion to sign this transmittal to the town clerk to place the question on the ballot for the voters. And I would even take it a step further and suggest that, now, after we do this tonight, for the next 3 weeks, everybody here is gonna get hammered that you're raising taxes to buy a new ambulance, they just got a new station. You didn't do that. You voted to place this on the ballot per the requirement of the town meeting. That's all. You voted to place it to the ballot. You turn around and tell the person, you're gonna vote whether or not your taxes go up, not me.
So town meeting told us to do this.
That's correct.
Okay.
All you're doing is, I mean,
Communication will be key, Mr.
The
Town
source of
Administrator.
funding a town meeting was to borrow the money. You're sending it to the ballot to see if the people want to vote to debt exclude.
It's
That's it.
per statute, we have to do it
It's-
that way. We're not
I
pulling
mean,
any
it
fast
is no,
ones.
but it always, it's incredible how this gets perverted. By the time this meeting is over, watch, it's gonna be the raise taxes.
What do you mean by the time it's over?
Oh, you're already getting it? So,
It is what it is. Paul, you've been longer than me, sorry, Mr. Chair. This board, in any incarnation I've served on, has never denied a department or a department head's request to go through the debt exclusion process. We've never, either by majority or by unanimous vote, we've always, if it's a valid request, we put it before the people. We did it with the police department for cruisers. We've done it for infrastructure, we've done it for equipment. As you stated perfectly, and everyone, it's what we have to do, it's the right thing to do, and I support it.
thank you for letting me go on my rant, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ruda. So you're looking for a motion to put it on the ballot?
I'm looking for a motion to put it on the ballot.
Which I just gave
Motion,
you.
I already made that motion, and
Oh,
I thought Sully seconded it.
Well, then, that's.
I thought Sully made it.
the mo-
Sully made the motion, and you asked if it was still on the floor. But I'll let you second it.
Did I second it?
That's,
You did.
That's fine,
yeah,
So
as
we've,
long as we do it.
yeah, we're doing it. We're just
You can third it.
I think Jay actually.
musical chairs here, that's all, as long as it gets done. So we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call votes.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
John Marcy, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Carrie Siganovich, aye, unanimous.
To give the people the opportunity to vote on it.
That's correct, Mr. Johnson.
Tax raiser.
Okay, next up is new business. It looks like I need to read a list of volunteer board and committee vacancies as of July 6th. Board vote to direct administrative secretary to immediately post and advertise or take any other action relative thereto. So folks sitting at home, these are the vacancies we have on boards, and we would really appreciate, everyone in town would appreciate if we could get some volunteers for these, to fill these up. We have 2 vacancies in the Dudley Housing Authority. We have 1 vacancy for an ADA coordinator. And this next one, Rail Trail Coordinator, we have 1 vacancy. Every time I'm on the rail trail, I see dozens of you. One of you, please volunteer to be the Rail Trail Coordinator. On the FAA, we have 4 vacancies. That is the board that decides recommendations on various financial things with the town, whether it be for town meeting or for elections, and they give opinions on exclusions or such. But be careful. If you join that, they end up moving you up here to the Board of Selectmen. Historical Commission, we've got 1 vacancy there. I know we've got a lot of history buffs in town. We just need 1 more of you. Personnel Board, we have 3 full-member vacancies, 1 alternate. More the merrier. Recreation Committee is currently inactive, so we have 5 vacancies there. Because this is on the sheet, it looks like we're looking to reignite that, get some recreation going in town. If you like having fun, please sign up for that. Next, we have the Town Administrator to cancel the 7/20/20 regular meeting.
Mr. Chair, on your last list, to just continue everybody that would like to know how finances work in town, that want to call us the override board or this and that, take a shot at the finance board and sit there and learn how the numbers really come to fruition every year. I'd certainly appreciate the opinions that are out there that are ill-informed, if they could become better informed. But go back to your other.
Oh, certainly. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I apologize for not asking if anyone had any
That's
comments
fine.
on those.
Nope.
Anyone else have a comment on the vacancies, other than pretty please, we need people to volunteer? Mr. Johnson?
If I've learned anything from the last X number of meetings that we did on Facebook Live, is there's a lot of people that are interested in how government works.
Uh-huh.
And if you applied some of that energy and asked those questions while on a board, just think of how much good you can do and move things forward in those areas. So I'd highly
Well
recommend,
said.
I'd highly recommend the people that are very interested in all sorts of things and didn't miss a single meeting on Facebook Live. You know, this is a chance to do some good, and then, you know, apply that knowledge to the next thing if you're interested, or that might be enough.
And Mr. Chair, at the risk of being a cynic, you don't have to get signatures. You just gotta write a letter to the selectmen and express your interest. And if you decide you like it and you can progress on, as you said, and move on to a different board that requires, you can, but it gives you a chance to dip your toe in the water, and you don't have to worry about signatures, you don't have to worry about running a campaign, you don't have to worry about anything except just asking.
Mr. Sullivan's absolutely correct. I remember when I wrote my letter to be on the FAA, and I came before, and you all graciously appointed me. It's that simple. You write a letter, raise your hand, say, I want to help, and by golly, we'll make it happen.
Same here, 10 years ago.
Reason.
I wrote a letter as well, just after not being involved, and I decided to get involved, you know, and Mr. Johnson, I love what you said. Like I said, focus energies in a positive direction would be beneficial for everybody, because you have some skills that we don't have, right? For some of these open roles. So let's come on in, talk to us. Thank you.
Great. Anything else? Mr. Joseph, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Well, that's good, you're good. Next up, we have the town administrator, cancel July 20th, 2020 meeting.
Can we?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
We've got a motion, Mr. Joseph, and a second from
Mr.
Mr.
Johnson.
Johnson. Any
On the
discussion?
motion? Yeah, discussing. We're gonna have, it's gonna come fast and furious in August between the new superintendent. We're gonna start getting numbers back slowly from the state and everything else. Let's take advantage of the break when we can. And now now there's a lot to do, but not a lot to deliberate. So maybe let's take the break now. That's why I asked to have it postponed.
That's the will of the board, so be it. We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. I believe that you're up first,
Paul
Paul.
Joseph, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
John Marcy, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Kerry Sigenovich, aye. Unanimous. Next up, town administrator, board vote to adopt special rule of order consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to add for the board's consideration, I don't know if you've had a chance to read it or if you know what a consent agenda is, but for those who don't know what it is, it's a special section of the agenda, generally at the beginning, where, for example, let's say, for example, we were going to renew liquor licenses. Instead of reading 37 different names and DVAs, we would put that all onto the consent agenda. It would be reviewed in the beginning. If any member of the board wanted to pull out a specific business and handle that separately, we could do that. But it also, for those things that are just administrative in nature or non-controversial in nature, it condenses the entire agenda and you accept it in one motion. So you would renew 37 licenses in one motion, done, instead of reading them all into the record and going over each one individually.
But one board member could choose to take something out.
One board member can pull them out at any time.
No majority, no supermajority,
Nope.
just one.
That's correct.
Any questions, board members?
Mr. Chairman, can you please summarize what a consent is?
I'm sorry, Paul, could you say that again? You turned into a robot at the end. Couldn't quite hear you.
Yeah. Could you please summarize what a consent agenda is?
Mr. Ruda, could you summarize what a consent agenda is for Mr. Joseph?
Mr. Chairman, through you, a consent agenda takes issues that are either routine or so widely supported that they make approval a separate action would be to bog the group down. That's how it's explained in this handout that I passed around with the agenda packet. So, let's say, one of the items on a consent agenda is, will we have a Christmas tree lighting on a certain date? People have seen that, we send out the agenda in advance. We're not gonna have a lot of debate over it, but maybe we add that into 3 or 4 like items, that could be placed on the agenda. Something like, the renewal of a maintenance contract for the building, the Christmas tree lighting, renewing liquor licenses with people, with entities that have never had a violation for the past year, or don't qualify to be separately pulled out. Those sort of things that are non-controversial and generally widely accepted, you put into one agenda item, and you act as a group and vote on the group as opposed to each individual motion, each individual item.
Thank you. Is
So,
that,
in other words, you wouldn't find the town administrator's contractual raise on a consent agenda at any point. But you might find, like I said, the Christmas tree lighting on there, because it's non-controversial.
and at any point in time, any board member can decide to pull something out and bring it up for discussion.
That's correct.
Is
In
that,
advance of voting on it, could you please remove, Acme Liquor Store from this consent agenda because I have some additional information I'd like to discuss? Fine. It doesn't stop or remove the other 30 renewals. It just pulls that one out specifically.
sounds like it makes the meetings
It
go a
gets
little
things
smoother.
moving right along.
Mr. Joseph, is that satisfactory?
Yes, sir, thank you.
Very welcome. Any other questions, board members, concerns, comments? Mr. Marcy?
Yeah, so that's something new that I hadn't heard of before, Jonathan. I get the idea of it. Do you know of any other towns around us that have
Charlton
adopted
does it, Mr.
Who does?
Charlton does it.
Charlton? Okay.
Well, we share a school, so let's do it.
Let's do it.
Well, that was good to know. We're pretty traditional when it comes to, Robert's rules. I think somebody wanted to change this to town meeting time years ago, and I was against that. But something like this, I think as having a tool, especially for the liquor licenses and stuff like that, I can see, but, maybe not use it sparingly, I think would be my recommendation.
So, Mr. Chairman, excuse me, part of this handout is Robert's Rules of Order newly revised does not require that every single item be handled with the full pomp and circumstance of a motion, second, debate, and a vote. Some decisions are either routine or are so widely supported that to make approval a separate action would be to bog the group down.
Mhm.
That's the whole point behind this.
No, I get it for
Yeah.
like that, those items you outlined.
Yeah, right.
I was just saying, let's
Isn't that-
let's make it rare. Like,
Well, it would become a regular agenda item, that's the point.
and if there's a section, so anything.
A section, and if
And if
there's,
there's nothing, if there's something, put it in and
Correct.
somebody can pull it out.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
exactly.
All right, fair enough.
Looking for a motion, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Motion that we accept special rule of order consent agenda, effective immediately.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
John Marcy, aye?
Jay Johnson, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Harry Sigenovich, unanimous. Next on the agenda, Highway Superintendent Search. Board vote to approve immediate posting and take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Town Administrator.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Joseph.
I'm gonna move, because this is pretty straightforward. I'm gonna move that the town authorize a highway superintendent search committee and to approve an immediate posting based on the 3 points that the town administrator included, which I'd like Ruth to read into the record, which is direction on how to proceed after the personnel board has done their work and made recommendations to the DOS or through the town, the personnel director to the Board of Selectmen that there's approval of the hiring timeline and approval to post the position.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Just, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
what is the composition of the search committee? We're gonna do that after? We're just gonna take a vote to approve a search committee?
I thought we were going to, this was my understanding of it, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Ruda. I believe the point of this was to approve an immediate posting, get the posting out there to get applicants in, and then direction on how to proceed after the Personnel Board has done their work, make recommendations to the BOS, and Mr. Joseph has stated, or the Personnel Director, approval of the hiring timeline and approval to post the position. So I think in the motion, don't we need, we need the hiring timeline to approve it, don't we? Or is that included somewhere?
So the only, Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would ask for is, the posting date is listed as tonight, because we had it postponed last week.
Okay?
So I would recommend that we change, Michelle, can you do this in a day, or is that too ambitious?
I'm sorry?
Can this get posted tomorrow, or is that too ambitious? All right. So I would ask that we change the posting date to July 14th and approve the ending date to, I think the ending date should remain the same.
Are you okay with those changes, Mr. Joseph?
It's okay. Ending date's okay.
Yep, and you know, we don't know how it's gonna go. If they don't, the search and don't find somebody good, then the timeline will change. If we find somebody that we want, we make an offer, and he or she doesn't accept, the timeline's gonna change, and that's the understanding that is included in my motion.
Okay.
It's not what I'm going for.
So, Mr. Chairman, so what was it, Paul, what did you add to the list again for your motion?
I thought I heard search committee.
Those 3 bullets?
Search committee?
Is that a question to me?
It is, through the chair. What did you,
Kerry, can you repeat that, Kerry?
He wants to know what you added that is not on the agenda as a part of your motion. Is that right?
on the bullets, yeah.
Where it says that the recommendations are made to the BOS,
Yes.
I added in through the Director of Personnel.
Okay.
Which is him, right? Okay.
And everything else was the same, and we just added July 14th as a date.
Yes, sir.
All right, so that's okay then. I thought you added another layer in there at some point, because it says that, you know, proceed after the Personnel Board has done their work and made recommendations through us or through Jonathan. That's what you meant, okay. Just checking.
You're good, Mr. Johnson?
Yep.
Mr. Sullivan, anything?
That's fine.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Is that sufficient for what we need to do, Mr. Ruda?
I think so, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. Motion and a second, no discussion. Roll call vote.
John Marcy, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
John Marcy, aye.
Steve
Johnson, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Carrie Siganovich, aye, unanimous.
Okay.
Board members' comments. Who would like to go first? Anyone have anything?
Yes.
Mr. Joseph?
Recently, my wife had to be transported by ambulance. Time was of the essence based on what happened. There was a significant, somewhere in the vicinity of a 40-minute wait. And then the ambulance showed up. So my question is, why doesn't Hubbard Regional call us, our ambulance, instead of waiting for Webster's EMS? And I'm wondering if the town administrator could look into that and report our concern and report what he found out.
Can I ask Mr. Chairman, the fire chief to come up and
certainly.
Because he's gonna have more depth of knowledge than I will on that question.
We do not do transfers out of Hubbard Hospital. They are contracted with Webster EMS and a couple other privates.
Oh, they're contracted.
I believe so. So you don't even want to open that can of worms. And we're not set up to do transfers. We're an emergency 911 service.
So that's a transfer from that hospital to another hospital,
Yeah,
not from my home to the hospital.
through the chairman, Mr. Joseph, she didn't go to the hospital by our ambulance, correct? From home?
Are you asking if she got there by car?
I don't recall transporting her to the hospital from the house. She went by car, correct?
She did get a ride into the hospital, yes.
Yeah, not from us, though.
She got a ride to the hospital, and then she needed transportation,
I understand.
and time was of the essence, from Hubbard to St. V's in Worcester.
I understand that, but she didn't go to the hospital from Dudley ambulance, correct? From the house to the hospital, she wasn't transported by Dudley ambulance.
She did not go by ambulance.
Okay. So you're speaking about,
Because, I'm going to tell you why. Because we didn't know what the seriousness of the situation was until she got to the hospital, and Hubbard said, we can't do some of the tests that need to be done. They were going to take her to UMass Med, but that was full, so instead, St. Vincent had the ability to do the tests, and that's where she got transported to by ambulance.
oh, that's fine.
After a considerable wait.
I just was trying to clarify that. I just wanted to make sure. But again, Webster does the transfers out of Hubbard, I believe, along with a couple other services, but I'm not positive. We're not equipped to do transfers, and I will say this. We work great with Webster, and generally Webster's right there unless they were extra busy, which could have been the case. But while it's unfortunate, I think that was probably an outlier because Webster has a track record of being a phenomenal service, and I'd back Gary up.
I understand that. I understand that, Chief. But I just hope and pray that someone doesn't die while they're waiting for Webster EMS ambulance.
Okay, but from our standpoint, we're not equipped to do transfers. We're not set up for it. It requires additional training, and we're not equipped to do that as a town service, at least not in this town. That's the only reason why we don't do the transfers. And that's always been the case here.
All right.
Thank you, Chief.
That's it for me.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Give our best to Laurie, please.
Yes, Paul, give our best. Mr. Marcy.
I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marcy, do you have anything?
Nothing, just, I just wanted to say to everybody, it's good to be back, in our room to conduct the town's business. Everybody's socially distant. I mean, I see George and Stan probably about 100 feet away, it seems. Maybe not that far, but thanks to everybody who set this up so we can, get back to some sense of normalcy. I know we all have our masks on as we're supposed to, and we have the plexiglass shields. So I think you guys did a great job getting everything set up for us to do this. So thanks.
Mr. Johnson?
Yep. Was that a question for me?
Oh, no, I was recognizing Mr. Johnson.
Go ahead.
Might be a stage name.
Magic Mike.
Just as we go into, month number 4 or 5 for the COVID response, really think long and hard about those around us that can use a little bit of helping hand. try to support your local businesses and, be kind to others.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Sullivan?
I just want to echo what everybody said. 0 active cases is an amazing number. You'd have to be totally blind to not see what's going on in parts of the country, and we all were chomping at the bit to get reopened, but it appears that we owe a big thanks to our state leaders who showed restraint, and we owe to our local people who showed restraint. And as Mr. Johnson just said, now that things are coming back, try to support your local businesses and continue to keep an eye on those that need it. You have elderly neighbors or shut-ins, go up to the door or give them a call and make sure everybody's doing okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I'd like to thank Steve Rogerson. He's the veterans agent in town. He gave us all, I don't know if you can get that, or he gave us all this book. It's Vietnam War 50th Commemoration, A Time to Honor. It was a very nice gesture from him. It's kind of special to me. My two oldest brothers actually served in that. I enjoy reading and learning about it as much as I can. So thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Other than that, I want to echo what Mr. Marcy said about you folks getting this ready. The plexiglass, the making sure everybody's great. I mean, this is just organized as anything. Great job, whoever did this. Departmental communication. Police chief, do you have anything?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of quick things. We're still considering, or still using the dispatch center to find some part-time assistance for the town hall since it's opened on a part-time basis. The courthouse has opened for some limited business. We're only handling 4 in-custody arraignments at a time, so it has been challenging for some places as well. So still working on that. We have the beach is open, so you can see it was busy down there with some things. A lot of out-of-town residents that were there this weekend, so issued several parking violations and things to people there, and just trying to clean up some of the issues that are around there. So, that's about all I have for now. If there's any questions, I can go from there. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for the chief? Mr. Marcy?
Chief, did you get, consulted the Mass Chiefs about the Senate bill that Rep. Durant talked about?
Oh, yeah, we've been pretty active with that. I spent most of the weekend, because I serve as like a co-chair of the legislative committee, so we've been pretty active with that whole thing. The Senate was, we're checking some of the updates on the votes today. A lot of it's very disappointing. They've thrown so many things into this bill that's complicated so much, so many issues. We thought we had some good discussions to kind of narrowly focus some things and get the training down, some standards committees, and do some different things that would really advance the profession. But they're just taking a lot of things and throwing them out there that seeing whatever will stick. And we offered some suggestions on things. We wanted to work with some things, and very few of them I think were taken as a matter of course. So all we really do at this point is we wait to see what the House has, and we work with the governor and see what we can do to kind of make it better. But it is frustrating when you're basically paying for the sins of somebody else from halfway across the country, where we have to take Massachusetts and lumping into one category with a broad brush. So we're hoping for some better things from the House, and working with the governor and seeing where that all goes from there. So, but thank you for
Thanks
asking.
for your input on
Chief.
that, Chief. Appreciate
Just
that.
to say kudos to our guys too, just through all this type of controversy. It's just another thing adding to the COVID, where everybody is really just focused, doing their job. We get great support from the people of town. I, again, appreciate the support of the board, and the administrator, and everybody here that helps us. We're very fortunate, because there's a lot of places that aren't as fortunate as we are. So thank you to everybody for that.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
George, do you have anything? Mr. Petrinos? Geez, it's going to take you a half hour to get up here from all the way back there.
We'll get an Uber next time.
Yeah, we're gonna put you in the hallway.
Just a notification and a couple of small things. Just got the updated drought monitor from the state, okay? Right now, we're in what we call a significant drought, okay? It's not something that we have to really worry about yet, but it could be down the line. The state overall is in either significant or it's in a mild drought, and then it goes to 0 when you get to the southeast region down by the Cape. I'm just urging right now that everybody conserves water, especially with the delicate situation with the water department right now. I don't want to go into a mandated type of restriction or no use at all, but it will go that way if it has to. But right now, we're taking each day as it goes, and hopefully we can ask for some rain, and that would help. But this scale goes by the amount of thunderstorm activity that's been going on through the state. That's why the southeast region is a little bit in better shape now. Most of the activity's gone that way. So they're doing a little bit better. But we're monitoring it. We get updates monthly on it. But we'll keep you guys posted if anything changes right now. A couple good things on the sewer department side. We've just installed a new generator at Lakeview Ave for the residents down in the Lakeview Ave area. That's going to expedite emergency power when we have a storm or we lose power from another reason. Hauling generators around is no way to go, and it's very difficult. But now with that station on its own, that just increases the capacity right there to turn on and take care of the problem almost instantaneously. So we've got that already in the works. The final testing's coming up on that. I've got a gracious donation from Mr. Haynes over on the Lions Road Estates, Truman Ave Estates. He's agreed to give us a sum of $7,500 towards the purchase of another generator for Lions Road. And that station is another critical asset over there for the new developments going on over there. I explained to him the situation we're having there. I was a little concerned about emergency power for the long length of time it would take to get there with hauling a trailer to power, especially with new houses going in. And we discussed it, and he graciously offered the $7,500. I received a check last week, and I sent him a thank you note for that, and I'm going to be now out speccing out the generator for that station. So that's another good thing. The water department, I won't get into the projects because I've explained it to the board many months. All the projects now are ongoing. They're being speeded up through the DEP, and certain aspects of it already are heading up due to our SRF loan. It requires us to do some development, some initial planning, stages such as Mason Road, stations, things like that. So all that stuff is coming into fruition. Like I said, I'm hoping for good things to start on the Station 1 project by spring of 2021, or towards the summer, depending on permitting and fast-paced as we can get to get that station online, and that'll be great. The project over for the transitional water main is going to be sometime in the September timeframe. We're going to be digging that, laying that main, and get that blending process for PFAS going. That should buy us some time right there. And we're also, I've got other grants applying for the PFAS treatment plant, some water assessment for the water department, for asset assessment, things like that. Anything there's grants out there, we're grabbing, putting our name in the basket so we don't get left behind. We've got a pretty good position now that we've got the other grants. They're looking at us more direct that we do need these things done, and they're getting done as fast as possible. DP has been very good to us, has helped us along greatly. So things are percolating. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan.
George, is that Lions development with town water and town sewer?
That's just going to be town sewer, no town water. So there is going to be we're going to have a line put in for one hydrant going down, and then probably the quarter of the way in from the Lions Road. We'll work on that, and then the rest of it will also be sewer. And there's an easement way for the town at the end of the development to go off to the back side. This was arranged by myself and Greg Valiakonis at the time, and I believe Mr. Haynes is going to allow us access. They're going to have that in writing for the town to have access to. There's a parcel the town owns back there, so if they have to get to that point there. So I believe, and I'm going to remind him of it when I talk to him again, just to make sure it's still going to be in place. So he agreed to that too.
So, one more question, Mr. Chair. If it's not on town water, does that fall under the, he has to put a cistern in, or he has to make a contribution?
There's no provisions for a cistern. That's something on a different nature. We're providing the type of pumping, external pumps we want for each house. There's no pumping station going in there like the Eisenhower Drive situation, which is going to be also taking the first phase now that the COVID's kind of subside a little bit as far as people not doing anything. We're starting to raise the hatch on that too and get work done on that. But these are going to have individual pumps in each one of these households, ejector pumps out to the street.
I'm talking about the water?
No, nothing as far as, there's the hydrant's right there. And like I said, you could go up to 1,000 feet to pump and take off the hydrant and then relay from there. So it wouldn't be worth it to even put a cistern in there unless they want, I mean, unless that's something, a requirement the town wants to give them, but at that point, I wouldn't say it'd be worth it with a hydrant system so close like that. It's, you know, it never was planned that I know of, and nothing was ever approved for that or needed for that because of the range of the hydrants to that area. So,
Oh, George, real quick, so when's the last time we had like a water ban, so to speak? That's not very common, but I remember.
we had, well, aside from the moratorium we had many years ago, when we were under a lot of usage because of all the leaks we had, we just couldn't keep enough in the tanks. We put a ban on all new house for water tie-ins, things like that. We could enforce, I don't even remember, we did some kind of outdoor water banning, but it didn't really prove too effective. You can't really police it too well.
No,
You
I
can try.
know, just people might ask, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, and like I said, right now, people should be exercising that even though we're not mandating it, but sometime down the line, we could get more aggressive with it and require some definite alternating days or no days or what have you. But I'm trying to get through the next few months and not have to do that. Once I get into the late October timeframe, I'm in pretty better shape as far as usage goes.
Thanks, George.
Did you have a question for him, Chief?
You were talking about Lions Estate, right, George?
Yeah.
We asked them to move that one hydrant down to the first house so we can reach the whole development.
See where it is.
So that was what they were gonna do.
So that would waive the cistern requirement.
Yeah, I remember, George, when we came to the planning board meeting, they were gonna run that line for you and run it down just right in front of that, well, not right off to the side, right in front of the
First house, some area somewhere.
Yeah, right before the cul-de-sac, that way we can reach the whole development.
Yeah, if you get somebody, like, if you go off towards, like, Perryville Estates has a cistern in there, and over in Tobin Farms has a cistern in there, I think it's like 2,000 gallons, 2,500, somewhere in that range, but those areas, there's no near hydrant systems that can benefit. This area does have hydrants near the area, and you can actually cut some areas through the backyards for the Lions Road hydrants to go to that development through the yards into the back. So there's opportunities there for water usage, so it works out that way.
I think Perryville has a dry hydrant that goes in
They
the
did.
back.
They have that.
Doesn't have a cistern. And
I
Tobin,
thought by where your house was, I think over in
Right.
that, I thought there was a cistern right in there, or there's a dry hydrant there with a screen, but,
right.
yeah. But anyway, yeah, so they're gonna be in fairly good shape that way anyway.
Okay, that was my only concern.
Good.
Thank you, George.
You have anything, Mr. Galinsky? Let me guess, stickers.
Well, the stickers for the recycling center, that's, it's been a controversy with a lot of people. They're complaining about prices, this and that. But I've been trying to explain to them the reasons why a lot of this is being done is to monitor things and keep everything so we have an accurate count of how much trash is being, thrown away by the people, not just coming in by truckloads. And now that you will have a pretty good sum of how it's gonna go. And the people were complaining about the prices, but if you explain a little more to them, they're understanding that the prices really aren't that bad. Besides the recycling center, we're doing a lot of numerous projects like we're out here. Every day we have to sanitize the playground. We sanitize the stuff at the beach. We open the beach every day. We've been weeding out here in the parking lot, all the islands, because it doesn't look too good. We trimmed all the bushes around the War Memorial out there. We're trying to get to the brush mowing on the sides of the road. The brush mower was down for a little while, but the mechanic fixed it, and we have it out there. We're trying to do what we can with it, because we're so limited that trying to throw guys out there to do it, it's kind of tough. We're trying to mow the landfill. We've been doing that. We're just trying to get the little things that need to be done around town. And if people complain about something, we try to see if we can address the issues. But all in all, everything's going pretty smooth.
Mr. Sullivan?
I'm glad Stan came up, because I know he doesn't like to come up when he's here. I just want to thank him. Stan's interim foreman, as was mentioned before, the superintendent's out. Stan's wearing two hats, and very, very undermanned department. And Mr. Reuter and I were in discussion about the Veterans Court, because a veteran reached out to both of us, and they took care of it the next day. maybe not a big thing to some people, but it's a big thing with the manpower situation and the fact they took care of it to make it look nice for the veterans. And I just want to make sure Stan publicly gets thanked, because he's in a really tough situation right now. His department really took a whack, so I just want to make sure. I was going to make you come up if you didn't come up. I was going to make sure you did. Thank you, Stan.
Anything else, Mr. Marcy?
You know, just Stan, thanks for like talking about the recycling center. You know, it's a hot button issue. We spent, 1.6 million hours talking about it. Now we're finally implementing it. I know town administrator is working with you and your team to make it, as best as we can, to your point, right? Where do you see like improvements that, just in the first couple of weeks of the new system, new hours, what kind of improvements do you think we need to make?
Well, it's more controlled. It's gonna be a controlled system, because the people are gonna be stopped. You're gonna count you're gonna see what they have. You're gonna have their sticker number. It's gonna be recorded.
Okay.
So then because it's gonna be manned by 2 men, not 1.
Right.
So the second person can watch everything that's going on to make sure there is nothing else that they had that you didn't know about.
Right, do you think the guys that are there are aware of that? They feel they've had enough training and everything?
Well, they haven't had it yet, because
Okay.
Pratt is just going to be coming in.
Okay. Yeah.
Hasn't been
I've had
done
some
yet.
people,
Casella
like-
and everything's supposed to come tomorrow for the switch out.
Good. No, that's good to hear. I knew we had a plan, just, some people, I just said, just be patient was my message back, but, no, thanks for that. Yeah, and the other thing I had was the brush mowing. People had reached out, I guess, so, thanks for the update there.
Quick, just so everybody at home knows, what is the last day to use an old sticker?
This Saturday.
Saturday. After this Saturday,
You need you need a sticker to dump your trash.
you need a nice maroon one, not a blue one.
All right.
And I'll vouch, Stan was running around Saturday morning, drenched with sweat, running around putting stickers on everybody's cars. And he got beaten up a little bit, not physically, but mentally. So, yeah, good job. Good job.
And the grass expires too. People have just grass.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of people asked about that. Grass mowers.
Sunday's a loss for everything. Anything else? We're good?
Good. Thanks,
We're
Dan.
good.
Thanks, Dan.
Because the chief has got an announcement about a grant, and he's holding something there.
He's got props, Mr. Chairman.
I saved you for last because there's props. It's like Gallagher. Prop comedy comes last.
Yeah.
Is that what we're wearing next week?
So I recently applied for 2 grants, the regular AFG grant, which is the Assistance to Firefighters grant through FEMA. And I applied for roughly, it was like 66,000 for new hydraulic equipment, which I haven't heard. But then back in May, I believe, April, May, they came out with the Assistance to Firefighter grant COVID-19 supplemental. And I put in for $18,904 for, it was for protective equipment, like a lot of people put in for N95 masks and things like that. But what we did is we looked into it, and what this is a firefighting SCBA mask that goes with our air bottles that we use in firefighting. But I got these respirator canisters, and there's an adapter that goes on here, which hasn't come in yet. And these 2 canisters go on here, so then it can act as a face shield and an N95 mask that can be reused over and over again, and these are good till 2025. This bigger canister goes to a PAPA unit that hasn't come in yet, which is a powered air purifying respirator. It just straps to your chest, and 2 of these canisters plug into a 2 notches in the thing, and then a hose runs up and connects to this. So the mask has just become a multi-use mask. And the grant was awarded for $18,904. These are good for 10 years. So,
Wow.
and the only hitch is, because I know you're going to ask that question, is the 5% match, which is $900.19. So we got funded $18,003.81 from the federal government for these. So we received these, and we'll be receiving the rest shortly. So, if we ever come into a pandemic again, or if we have the second wave, and all of a sudden we can't get masks, this could be used by our individual responders, and you can wash it and reuse it, so, I thought it was, you got more bang for your buck,
I had a
instead of it being disposable.
Great team.
$900 get you 3 masks on eBay, so yeah, you did great.
So that was it.
Good job,
Oh,
team.
thanks, chief. No,
Fantastic.
you're the king of
Can
grants.
I just
Thank you
ask
for
a
all you do.
curiosity question, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly,
You
certainly.
need the air with that, or can you just use it as a mask? Is it just like a filter, or
What's that?
does it have to be hooked up to the tank, or does the cartridge filter it out?
There's an adapter that goes on the front of it, and the cartridge filter, you're not using the bottle, SCBA
That was the,
bottle
yeah,
at all.
okay.
This is, so, you're basically taking the SCBA mask and using it for a different purpose.
Okay.
And if you remember, we got the SCBA and the masks off a grant too, so I
Right.
put that in my narrative when I wrote the grant. So you're actually getting multi-uses out of one piece of equipment.
Yeah, that's great.
That's excellent. Thank you, chief.
Thanks, chief.
And looks like we've come to the end. The chair will entertain a,
He's all set.
I'm sorry?
He's all set.
Paul, you're all set?
I'm as set as I can be.
Attaboy. All right, the chair will entertain a motion for adjournment. That is what's next on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a
Second.
second and another second. Roll
So I'll
call.
be a third.
There you go. Roll call vote.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
John Marcy, aye.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Gary Siganovich, aye. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Everybody, good night.
Thank you.